Hello everyone and welcome to today's Corporate Governance and Audit Committee. Firstly, I hope you're all well and safe. Just a reminder, members, that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed. If you want to make a contribution, please type speak into the chat box. First item is membership of the committee. We haven't had any apologies, although Councillor Steve Hall should be joining, but he's not in at the moment, so he may just be a bit late. I haven't had any declarations of interest. We don't need to declare anything duly for the members' allowances, do we?
No, Chair.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder, all this agenda is being taken in public. We don't have any deputations, petitions or public questions, so we'll jump straight to number 7, which is the report on the members' allowances independent review panel 2021-22 reference to council. So I'll pass over to Julie.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. For members of the public who might be watching this, my name's Julie Muscroft. I'm the Service Director for Legal Governance and Commissioning at the Council, and I'm the Council's Monitoring Officer. I'm just going to quickly go through the report, which is agenda item 7 on the meeting today. So this report looks at or considers a report by the members' allowances independent review panel, which met in November last year. The council is required to have an independent review of members' allowances, and that was the purpose of the meeting. It is chaired and made up of a number of independent members of the public who help us on an annual basis to look at the allowances that members receive. It was originally intended this year to do a wholesale root and branch review of what members receive, and to look at, in particular, special allowances which are given to people who chair committees. It was to look at and consider some of the issues arising from some of the new ways in which members are being required to work, in particular place-based working. As a result of the pandemic, it was felt by the independent panel that they would like to postpone that discussion until later on in the year, to enable to have a bit of clarity about what was happening with the pandemic, and to enable to have a full examination and have feedback and input from all members across all groups and people who are already on, who are carrying out some of the roles as chairs. That will happen now, I think, in July. And so in the meeting at the end of last year, the panel just looked at the basic allowance to members, and also whether there should be any increase to special responsibility allowances. Recently, members' allowances have increased in line with officer rates of pay, and when the panel met, it recommended that the basic allowance be increased in line with the amount which would be awarded to Kirklees council officers. That was yet to be agreed, and actually at the moment is still to be agreed, and could indeed not be any increase whatsoever. It agreed that in relation to special responsibility allowances, those remain at the same level as they are at the moment, pending the root and branch review in July. The outcome of the panel is considered first here by Corporate Governance and Audit Committee, who then make a recommendation to Council. They'll be making a recommendation to Council, who will be meeting next week. Of course, this is a recommendation only from an independent panel. Members are entitled not to agree with that or to propose something different. I know that the chair of this committee has put forward a proposal in relation to what should be agreed, which do you want me to read out, Councillor Simpson, for the benefit of the public before we have a discussion about it?
Yes, please, Julie. It's been circulated to members beforehand, but if you can read it out to the public, that'd be appreciated.
Okay. So So the intention is that the allowances be frozen at the current level. That's in relation to the basic, the members' basic allowance. And so it's proposed that the recommendation to council should say as follows: that the committee conveys thanks to the members' allowances independent review panel for their work. And notes the outcome of the panel as which is attached in Appendix A of the report that members are considering today. That the report be submitted to Council on the 17th of March with a recommendation that Council resolved not to apply an increase to the members' basic allowance for the 2021-2022 municipal year. The third recommendation is that it be noted that should changes subsequently be applied to the special responsibility allowances following the review of members' allowances scheme scheduled to take place in the summer 2021, that the panel had recommended that any such adjustments to the payments be backdated if applicable. And that finally, that it be noted that the outcome of the review of the members' allowances scheme, scheduled to take place in summer 2021, will be considered by Corporate Governance and Audit Committee before any further recommendations are made to Council regarding any proposed changes to members' allowances. So in effect saying, before there was any increase to these special responsibility allowances, if that's in fact one of the recommendations from the independent panel, it would need to come back through this committee for a recommendation before going to council for a decision on it.
Thank you very much, Julie. So firstly, I do want to, as the recommendation says, thank the independent panel for their work and what they do in meeting, considering these matters carefully and making their recommendations to us. You know, their work is really important to ensure, you know, that allowances are taken out of the political sphere as much as possible and are decided upon fairly. Now, this report that we've got with us on this occasion is exceptional. It's not only exceptional due to the circumstances we find ourselves in. It's unique in the time that I've been a councillor, and from my discussions with officers, I think in their experience as well, in that we don't have a unanimous agreement from the panel on the basic allowance. As you know, there's the minority and the majority recommendation about how to deal with that. I think it's also quite unique, and there's a clear and strong emphasis that we should take our own view on the basis of the many factors at the minute, on which I agree with them, and I think we all will agree with them on that. So, as has been read by the monitoring officer, I'll be moving those recommendations that have been circulated before the meeting. The intention of the recommendation to council is that both the basic and special allowances be frozen at the current level until the review in the summer, and then following that review, that's required, as Julie said, to come back to us before it goes back to the council again, and we'll again make a recommendation then. I do think it's important we don't politicise the issue of allowances, and that we are led by an independent panel. So given this is a unique report and the circumstances in which we find ourselves, I do hope— I'm not sure I understand. Apologies, that's my watch. I hope that we can agree that freezing the allowances at least until the summer is the right approach, and that we can resolve to make that representation to council. I can see Councillor Taylor has indicated to speak, so I'll bring Councillor Taylor in. John.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, but this is one where you and I don't agree. I thought there was a cross-party agreement that we would not be taking an increase in the members' allowance, the basic allowance, this year. This proposal that you brought forward gives the opportunity for us to change our mind on that later on in the year. And that wasn't my understanding of the basis of the agreement that had been reached. I would therefore propose an amendment to your proposal. And for members, I'm proposing an amendment to the fourth bullet point. The fourth bullet point, as it reads at the moment, is that it be noted that the outcome of the review of members' allowance scheme, scheduled to take place in summer 2021, will be considered by Corporate Governance and Audit Committee before any further recommendations are made to Council regarding any proposed changes to the members' allowance. I would alter that to say regarding any proposed changes to members' special responsibility allowances. And I think by doing that, we make it very, very clear that the agreement that we reached, that in view of the special circumstances this year, that we would not be taking an increase in the members' basic allowance for the year 2021-2022, actually remains in place for the entire year, and isn't one where we make one decision now, and then later on, perhaps when it's after elections and it might be politically more easy to do so, we might then change our mind. So I'm proposing that as an amendment, and it will be for the committee to decide. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I have to say, I do think we agree. I think we just read it differently, but I do think the existing wording has the same meaning intention. But I don't have a particular issue with what you've suggested because I think we agree. And I don't think it changes it materially. So I don't mind. I think I do believe that we agree on this, and that the basis of the agreement that was had is still there. Can I invite other members to comment, please? Would anyone else like to come in?
So are you proposing to accept my amendment?
I'm happy to do so, John, because I don't think it changes it materially. I just think you've read my proposal in a different way to how I understand it. But I think we agree. I don't think it changes it materially. So I'm happy to accept your amendment personally. I'd like to hear what other members think, but no one's indicated to speak. But I'm happy to accept it, John. Councillor Davis, you indicated.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was about to say. Yeah, I think that I'm sort of standing in between the two of you. I absolutely agree with the principle. I disagree with how Councillor Taylor is actually interpreting your email. If it needs strengthening to reinforce that, I'm happy with that as well.
Councillor Richards, sorry to put you on the spot, but could I invite you to make a comment, please?
Right, it's a little bit difficult not having known anything about this until this morning. Obviously, I do agree that we should be freezing the allowances, but I can see that there is a bit of, it looks like there's wiggle room in reading these two emails, which is why I'm sort of sitting on the fence at the minute, because I'm not exactly sure what we're trying to amend.
Yeah. So just to make clear, either way, whichever of whether John's amendment is accepted or not, the full review would have to come back to us nonetheless before it is referred on to council. So that's why the wording of my original proposal is, and that was written up by Julie, is worded as it is. It's not some deliberate attempt to create wiggle room so that a decision can be taken after an election and politicise the issue rather than what the intention actually is, which is that to reflect that the review will take place and that'll come back to us and then council. But if that makes you feel more comfortable, John, that the wording as you have said it better reflects our agreement, then I'm happy to accept it. But I do want to just reinforce that I do think you've misunderstood me.
I want it to be really explicit, and it's not just for the people on this call, it's for other people who may, if there is, as other members have mentioned, potential for there to be wriggle room in there, people will make political capital out of it, and I want to make sure that that isn't possible by making it absolutely crystal clear what we're talking about. I don't want other people to be able to play games with it.
I agree with you, John. I was hoping that my original proposal was did that sufficiently, but I agree. I severely dislike political games being played with allowances, and if accepting this would and reach that end better, I'm more than happy to do so. So Do we need John to repeat the wording of his proposed amendment, or have we got that, Andrea?
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, do you want me to read out the amended wording? So it was an amendment to bullet point 4 to clarify that we insert the words special responsibility allowance.
Okay. You're happy with that, John? Okay, I'm happy to second it. I see Councillor Davis has got a hand up, so I'll just bring Councillor Davis in. Or is that not intentional, Councillor Davis?
No, that was intentional.
All right.
Can I just, just an aside, Councillor Pinnock is in the lobby, is trying to join this meeting. I think it would be unfair to close out this discussion without her having her say again, because I know she's trying to trying to join. I just don't want this being put to bed before she's had a chance to join. That's all. Yeah.
I would like to hear Councillor Pinnock's input, but if she's having some IT issues, I don't know how long we can pause mid-meeting. I assume a colleague in the IT team is trying to invite Councillor Pinnock as we speak.
I believe so, yes.
She's just joined now. The notification has just come through. Yeah,
thank you, Chair.
Councillor Pinnock, are you with us?
Yeah, not happy about this. However, I don't know what's happened.
No, very sorry, but clearly.
Is there a reason? Does anybody know what's happened? I've checked my Wi-Fi signal's okay.
I'm not sure personally, but I can only apologise on behalf of officers on that, and would like to be with us. We're still on the item of the report to the Members' Allowances Independent Review Panel. Councillor Taylor has proposed an amendment to my proposal, which was circulated shortly before the meeting, as he felt that it doesn't strongly enough reflect our view that we shouldn't take a basic allowance increase. I disagree with his interpretation of it, but I accept that if it brings us to a consensus, that we should accept what he said. So can we just please read out the amendment for Councillor Bennett so that she's got all of the information?
Yeah, I've read it. Well, I'll see the amendment. I've seen John Taylor's, Councillor Taylor's whatnot, his sort of complaint. I mean, my thoughts on it was that in any case, as the basic allowance is tied to local government increases in pay, and that's going to be frozen. So, quite rightly, so will members. The only issue was the review in the audit by the independent review panel, and the root and branch review apparently of special responsibility allowances, and whether that will be backdated. And I think the strong recommendation we should give to the independent review panel is that there should be no backdating. But that can be done at the time, and would need to be done after they have brought their report in any case. So as long as we're clear that that's what we think is the right thing to do, and then of course it's not our decision in the end either, it's council decision. So I think perhaps that's where I would stand. I obviously haven't heard the debate, so I can only say what my thoughts were when I read the report and your proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. Yeah, what's been said largely reflects what you've said, and as you pointed out, in any case, after the review, it would come back to us, and we would then take a view before referring it on to Council again. So yes, Councillor Davis, your hand's still up. Is that wanting to come in again, or a hanging hand? No, a hanging hand. Okay. Okay, so we need to take a view on John's amendment. John's moved it. I've said that I'm happy to accept it, Councillor Pinnock, because I don't think it materially changes what we're saying. I think it's a matter of interpretation.
No, it changes nothing really.
Yeah.
Because in the end, it's a full council decision, not ours. That's the other thing to bear in mind.
Yeah, but as Councillor Taylor's and myself have said just before you're able to get in, if it brings us to a consensus and prevents us from having a political disagreement about it, I think we should accept it and take that to the council.
I'm happy with that. Yeah.
Excellent. Are all members content with that then? Excellent. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll move on to item 8, which is the mayoral accountability reference to cabinet report, and I will hand over to officers. I think it'll be either Nick and or Julie on this one, so I'll hand over to them.
Thank you, Chair. It's me again, actually. So if there's anything that I don't pick up, then Nick Howe's also here, who's a member of our policy team for members of the public watching this. So if there's anything that I've missed, Nick's kindly agreed to pick it up, and he's also here if there are any questions. We've also got Carl Larrard here, who is who's the head of corporate in legal services, and has been involved in pulling together the draft protocol on fraudulent functions, which is one of the issues that we are considering today. And he's been discussing and negotiating that with our fellow West Yorkshire councils and with the Combined Authority. And a number of you had the pleasure of an earlier presentation in relation to this when we had a workshop, which is covered in this report. So this report sets out in a little bit of detail how we've got to where we've got to in terms of the Combined Authority, and you'll all be very conscious that we're coming up to election time, and the election of the mayor for the West Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority. So as part of the process of agreeing an outline deal, going out to consultation and so forth, we've considered a number of reports through the council's cabinet and through council. And one of the things that came across loud and clear in relation to that was the need for us to consider as a council the governance arrangements in relation to the new Mayoral Combined Authority and how that would work and how that would sit alongside how we work ourselves, how it might impact on our constitution, and how we might learn some lessons from how the West Yorkshire Combined Authority had previously organised itself and worked with us. It was agreed to ask Corporate Governance and Audit Committee to do a piece of work looking at that. As you know, because I think a lot of you sitting in the meeting now were involved in that, we had a workshop at the beginning of this year on the 14th of January, where all members of the Corporate Governance and Audit Committee, including ex officio members and all of the chairs of scrutiny, were invited to attend the workshop to look at some of the issues that we were concerned about or what we would like to see in place in a new Mayoral Combined Authority. It also included others who are not on scrutiny panel as chairs or in this committee, so it had full cross-party representation, and if you look at Appendix 2 of this report, you'll see who attended. Okay, so we did that, and we considered a number of things that I think people wanted to see in a new relationship. This is obviously one for you to comment on, and I'm sure that you will when I've stopped speaking. But I found it really refreshing that there was significant amount of cross-party agreement and themes which came through this in relation to what we would like to see in our relationship with the new authority and with the mayor and with the new mayor in place. The appendix attached to Appendix 2 of this report, sets out some of the things that we talked about. And the first part of Appendix 2 sets out specifically what people said. And as you'll see, there were a number of themes. I think the key issue here relates to the need for greater transparency, the need for greater ability to know what's happening at mayoral combined authority level, and the ability for members at district level to be more involved in and be able to influence what's happening at the combined authority level. So as you'll see, some of the things, I'm not going to pick out all of the things on this list, but one of the key issues which I think is recognised across other West Yorkshire authorities is the need to the mayor to attend a scheduled full council meeting. That might be once a year. I think the jury was out on whether it should be once or twice. There should certainly be more interaction in relation to scrutiny. So that's scrutiny at a local level as well as at the mayoral combined authority level. Some members will have noted that the combined authority meets today, and indeed it's looking at what the proposed scrutiny model will be for the mayoral combined authority moving forwards. And the option that I think it's putting forward is having 3 scrutiny committees, which I think is something which we favoured, and I'm sure Councillor Smage, who I can see has a hand up, will wish to comment on. So I think there's a recognition of the need to for scrutiny to have a slightly different role moving forwards, and to involve and engage with councillors at district level. The ability to have sessions, question and answer sessions with members on a regular basis, and generally a greater visibility of decisions which are coming. So rather than hearing about things sometimes after the event, knowing about them well in advance of what's happening, so that we are able to influence and be involved in any decisions that they're taking. Okay. The other thing that we are asked to look at today, and what we considered in the workshop, was the concurrent functions protocol. So it was agreed that we would all work together to put in place a protocol about how we manage concurrent powers. Perhaps worth reminding members, particularly those who weren't at that meeting, that this is actually not a great deal different to what happens at the moment. The combined authority has lots of concurrent functions and powers that it managed on a day-to-day basis with us. So this concentrates on some of the new powers that are in place since the new order was put in place at the end of January, creating the mayoral combined authority. The concurrent powers protocol basically sets out how we will work together in terms of making decisions, and sets out, in effect, to me, I call it a backstop, to give us some comfort about what will be happening, and some appropriate notice in relation to some of the sort of bigger issues that might be going on. So you know, as members locally, what's happening. I'm going to pass over to the chair if you wish to discuss this and debate this. The recommendations are that you know the submissions made at the workshop on the 14th of January, which are summarised in Appendix 2, which I've talked about in a little bit of detail. That you consider the proposals and agree how you take forward potential recommendations for holding the mayor to account. That you delegate to the chair of the committee to submit a separate and independent submission to the combined authority, setting out your recommendations that you agree today for mayoral accountability, and that you refer this report and the outcomes from the discussion to Cabinet for their consideration as well. And you're also asked to recommend that Cabinet adopt the draft protocol of concurrent functions and associated statutory consent, which is set out at Appendix 1. And you should also note, and I should have mentioned this earlier, the protocol will be reviewed on an annual basis so that we keep track about how it's working and whether we think it's fit for purpose. So it will be looked at on an annual basis. And it's also recommended that you recommend to the Cabinet, when it meets next week, that authorities delegated to the Chief Executive in consultation with the leader to agree any subsequent changes to the protocol. That's actually set out in a little bit more detail in the report to Cabinet next week. I hope that summarises everything. Nick, if you think I've forgotten any fundamental issues, then please shout, and Councillor Simpson or anybody else who was at the workshop, obviously, please shout if you think I've missed anything, and I'm happy to come in and explain anything, as I think is Nick and Carl, if there are any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I'll just invite Nick to come in because I can see he's indicated before I bring members in. So, Nick.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's just important to re-emphasise that both pieces of work, the accountability and the concurrent powers, are being worked together by all 5 councils, who are all really keen to increase the accountability and transparency between ourselves and obviously the combined authority. So it's an ongoing piece of work as well, and to do the accountability, it's something that we'll have to keep coming back to, I think, over the coming years. But it's important to stress that this isn't just a Kirklees thing. All 5 have been working closer together on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. And firstly, I do want to start by thanking officers, in particular Julie, Carl and yourself, Nick, who I've been working with quite a lot in the recent months on this. I know there's been an exceptional amount of work, not just with us, but also coordinating that with our other constituent councils and WICA itself. And we've not had the longest space of time to do it all in, so it's been a lot of work, and we do appreciate it. I also want to thank the members who attended from all political groups and none. Our workshop that we arranged to discuss this issue, as Julie said, it was really positive. There was a lot of agreement on a lot of issues, and that's reflected in the report. I don't want to sound dramatic, but I do think this is one of the most important reports that we've had come to CGAC since I've become chair, because what we have here is the opportunity to shape the future of the combined authority and to ensure that it works for Kirklees. If we get this right, we can embed scrutiny at a local level and not just at a wider level. And I think that'll embed what I believe is a much needed culture change at the combined authority. As it stands, I don't think WICA scrutiny has worked for the vast majority of elected members across West Yorkshire, never mind the public. I wouldn't have much experience of WICA scrutiny. Well, I wouldn't have any experience of WICA scrutiny if it wasn't for the role that I'm in as chair of this at the moment. I think it's quite exclusive, and the relationship between the constituent councils hasn't been there as it should be in recent years. We can't just leave scrutiny of a mayor and the mayoral authority just to WICA officers and a small number of councillors that are already involved in WICA. I think we do need to have our input and build a model that works for each of our constituent areas, as well as West Yorkshire as a whole. So that's why we arranged the workshop, and we've got these ideas that have broad agreement, and now I think we need to take them to the combined authority and make the case for them. I feel particularly strongly, just to reference the report, about the need for regular attendance of the mayor at constituent councils, at least annually, to ensure that they're not just engaging at a WICA level, that each of the constituent councils can't be forgotten and councillors have their opportunities to raise those issues directly with the mayor in their place. I also feel strongly about the need for the written questions and representations being accepted. So no elected members can be excluded from scrutiny. You don't have to be on the WICA level scrutiny panel to be able to ask a question or make a representation. And of course, the need for a better relationship between regional scrutiny and local scrutiny. But those are just a few things that I wanted to highlight. I think there's much more in this report that I agree with and that has cross-party support. So it's on that basis of the broad agreement across all the groups that I hope we can agree to make these representations. So I'll open it up to members for comments, and if you've got any questions or any further ideas or issues that you'd like to raise, please do so. Councillor Smage was the first to indicate, so I'll bring Councillor Smage in.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. The proposal that's going today to WICA is that there's 3 scrutiny committees, which I think is a lot better than just the one that there was originally discussed. It is going to need scrutiny resource, both at Wyker and in Kirklees, to hold executives to account. There is a proposal in the papers for substitutes for those scrutiny committees, which I understand. I just think it's a shame that they haven't put in place a substitutes panel rather than possibly a substitute for each member. We have a panel, don't we? So if a member of this committee cannot attend, there's a substitute panel for substitutes to be taken from, and I think it's a shame that they haven't done that. But I would like to ask a question, please, in that we talked about in the workshop, we talked about accountability and transparency. And at the moment, there's no public questions at any meeting of Wyker. And in the papers that are going to Wyker today, it gives some procedure standing orders. And I want to check that these are the ones that are going forward, because ordinary meetings, that's described as an ordinary meeting in the combined authority, again, doesn't seem to have any public questions or deputations on it. And is it the case then that no meetings, no committees of the new mayoral combined authority would have public questions or public deputations on there? Because I think that's one thing that we did feel strongly about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smage. I'll just pass over to Nick or Julie on that, but just to highlight that that is something in the report that will be, if it's agreed by members, that we'll make our representations on, because as I said, we do feel strongly about that issue. So just Nick or Julie, do you want to come in on Councillor Smage's comment?
Do you want me to come in on that? I think I sort of made some reference to this when I made the presentation, actually, but in terms of and I think it's one of the specific recommendations we make as a result of the workshop, which is that there ought to be the ability to ask questions and the ability to have petitions and deputations. So this has been shared with legal colleagues and policy colleagues, and it's also been shared, I think, with the Chief Executive at the Mayoral Combined Authority, we've made very strong representations at the meetings that we've had that actually the Combined Authority can start to make these changes in advance of the mayor being elected. And I think perhaps one of the things it's worthwhile thinking about today and maybe picking up in your discussions or perhaps requiring the chair to feed back to the Combined Authority is the fact that they can choose to take those questions, those public questions, before the mayor is in place. It's something that they can choose to do without somebody being elected to that role. They could have done it before, and they can do it now. And just to reinforce that, we have made that case, both I've made that case and I think Nick has too. So the message has been given, I think, on more than one occasion and quite strongly. In relation to the comment you make about substitutes panel, the same comment has been made that perhaps there could be a substitutes panel, perhaps on a council by council basis. But perhaps that can be picked up later on in the detail. It does seem it does seem that it could take up quite a lot of resources if you have to have a specifically named substitute for each member of the scrutiny panel. But I'm sure that can be picked up in the detail afterwards. Hopefully that will help.
Can I just come back with a quick question? So it doesn't have to be in standing orders that you have to have public questions and public deputations at your meetings. That's what I'm asking. Does it have to be in standing orders for that to happen? Thank you.
I haven't looked at their standing orders. My view is that a chair can decide that they want to take questions if they decide to do that. But I think it's probably good practice to have it in the standing orders. There's nothing to stop them changing their standing orders to do that. They don't need the mayor in place to make those changes, they can do it themselves through their process, in my view. Does that help, Councillor Snage?
Yes, thanks. I know at the moment it's at the discretion of the chair. You know, I've been on committees where at the discretion of the chair you've taken public representations, but it needs something more formal so that it's actually in place, so that it is on agendas like it is on our standard agendas for all our meetings, so members of the public know that they have that option to be able to make those representations. I think that's where I'm coming from, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. I think the message is loud and clear. We should make. Sorry, apologies.
Yeah, that's okay, Julie. But yeah. Thank you, Councillor Smage. I think we all agree. I can see heads nodding, and if members agree, I will be including that in my representations when I make them on both counts. So thank you very much. Councillor Firth indicated next, so I'll bring Eric in.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to touch on scrutiny. I haven't seen the papers for today's meeting in Leeds, but I do know a little about the structure of the proposed scrutiny committees, which will be 16 members per scrutiny committee. Now, going forward, how will they get together? At Kirklees, we have a system whereby we have a report from scrutiny annually. Liz presents it. What will happen at WICA? If we've got 3 separate committees, will they report WICA and make an annual report, or will they have to report to the constituent councils as well? I know it's getting all a bit muddled, is all this. And who scrutinises the scrutiny committees at WICA? Do we? I know I posed another question, but it can all get really confusing, can all this? You know, we're scrutinising the scrutiny committees and expecting reports from everyone. Perhaps Julie can shed some light on that.
Julie?
I'm afraid I don't know the detail of the answer to that, Councillor Firth. It's a very good question, and I think it's something that we need to raise with them about how that's going to operate. I think that at the moment we were suggesting following our workshop was that we had the ability locally, so at district level, to ask somebody from the mayoral combined authority, who that is. It might be the deputy mayor, it could be somebody else who's a portfolio holder, potentially, to attend a scrutiny committee at the district. I would hope that most of the scrutiny would take place within the combined authority itself, but I can see occasions where it would be appropriate to ask for somebody to come and attend one of our scrutiny committees in Kirklees. In terms of how that will work in detail, I think perhaps the question you've asked should appear on a list, whether that's at officer level or whether it's from councillors, in relation to how that will operate. I don't think it sets that out necessarily in the report that's gone to the combined authority today. So there's more to work out on in terms of the practicalities of that moving forwards. But it's a good point and should be fed in, I think, to the list of questions moving forwards. I'll make a note of it.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric. As Julie says, it's a very good point. The report makes as I mentioned, the broader point of the relationship between regional scrutiny and local scrutiny. And I think that, as Julie says, is a point we should add on to representations on that issue. Councillor Pinnock. You're on mute, Councillor Pinnock. We almost went a meeting without it, but there's always one.
Of the century, you're on mute, and I know lots of people wish I was. However, I do agree with what you said about it was a very useful workshop that we had, and pulled out lots of ideas about how the council and the mayoral authority are going to be able to work together. So, and you know, they're listed in the appendices. There's two elements to this, and the one about the protocols, and then the one about, you know, how we're going to call them to account as far as Kirklees is concerned. The protocols is quite interesting, I think. You know, in theory, the mayoral authority has some quite significant concurrent powers over purchasing land for housing, for instance, which could be quite contentious. And I do think we ought to take that bit seriously, because one of the things that sort of half concerns me really is the mandate from local authorities leadership, which is, you know, the committee that forms alongside the mayor, won't necessarily reflect well the makeup of the local democratic elected representation in the constituent councils. I think that's the point that Andrew Cooper, Councillor Cooper, made at the workshop, which I thought was well made. And there is reference in there about independent, an independent group being formed so that those councillors could have representation. So I think that needs to be pursued, actually. Scrutiny, I'm glad that at least we're going to have 3 scrutiny panels. I agree with what you said, Councillor Simpson, about the remoteness of the current wider scrutiny. So it does seem to me there ought to be something, a requirement for our membership on scrutiny panels to report back to the council on a regular basis and to be able to be questioned about, you know, what actions they've been, what investigations they've undertaken and everything. And I obviously agree about public questions and deputations. That should be standard practice in any public authority. The last thing really is about one of the things we discussed at this workshop was, I think perhaps I raised it, about accountability panels. And I know others then explored that idea, and I thought we'd come to some sort of place where, you know, there would be a requirement on the mayor to set out a programme for the year. And then based on that programme, there could be not scrutiny to find out what was done, but accountability, which is slightly different. You know, has this been achieved? And if not, because I mean, there's always a huge number of reasons why things get pushed off the path you want. But then an explanation for that, and that's accountability rather than scrutiny. And it does seem to me that needs to be part of what happens if we are going to sort of have a link, not through scrutiny, but through direct accountability, which I don't think will be met by a mayor appearing once a year in front of a council. And I hope that we can continue to push that forward, actually. Oh, could you say what the 3 scrutiny panels are going to cover? I'm assuming one is policing, one is transport, and one is everything else. But is that right?
Sorry, do you want me to come in there? No, so policing is dealt with separately. So there will continue to be a panel in place in relation to that. Scrutiny relates to corporate transport and economy. So police will be dealt with separately. There are 3 additional ones. Okay.
And what are they going to cover? The transport, corporate, and
economy.
Third one.
Economy and skills.
Yeah,
whether it's core skills or economy.
Yeah.
Councillor Pinnock, can I, just before I bring John in, can I invite you to come back on your point of the accountability stuff, which obviously I completely agree with. I do hope that we would get accountability from the full council proposal and also from a better relationship with sort of ongoing scrutiny between local and the regional. But do you have any other sort of more specific proposals about how you could see that accountability panel sort of that you were talking about operating?
Right. So what all has as always is the way scrutiny works, and then I'm not being critical of that, but it excludes a sort of overall look at what is being done. That's true of the council, our scrutiny, and but more importantly, because of the strategic nature of the mayoral authority, you know, if you don't have an accountability panel that looks at the total package, what are they proposing for the year? What's the programme for the year? So you don't say looking at the underlying details, which is what scrutiny would look at, but you'd look at what actions have been taken to fulfil the programme that has been set out, presumably prior to elections or whatever, but also on an annual basis. How's that working? And that's more accountability rather than scrutiny, in my view. And I can see why you're thinking that that could be taken at perhaps a meeting between the council and the mayor. I'm not sure that would happen. I've seen it before. You end up with questions which are not always answered, and then no opportunity to come back and probe a bit further. So I think I'm not against the idea of a mayor coming to the council, because that gives everybody an opportunity to ask a question. But I think accountability, either at Wyker level or at, if we don't get it, at Kirklees council level, would look at a more strategic approach of what's been and the overall plans of the mayor and the combined authority, and what's being achieved and what do they hope to achieve next. Because I think then that's a looking forward rather than always looking back, which is what scrutiny does.
Yeah, thank you. So do you just, because I'm interested, do you see that as, is your sort of suggestion that a new panel would be set up to undertake that? Or do you think,
yes,
you know, or do you think something like overview and scrutiny could undertake those that sort of responsibility
with
a better relationship with
yes, I mean where it sits, I mean it would sit naturally within scrutiny panel here, but it would have to have a different approach, really, I think.
Sorry, John,
because the outcome is slightly different, isn't it?
Yeah.
What the aim?
John, I hope you don't mind, John. I'm just going to bring Liz in as this relates to scrutiny, if that's okay, John. So I'll just bring Liz in first.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just wanting to ask a question, because management committee in scrutiny has the leader of the council, under normal times, has the leader of the council come in to give his priorities for the year, and then at the end of that year asking what's happened about those priorities. So are you thinking of something similar, in that the mayor will give the forward and the combined authority would give the forward looking as to what their priorities and what they're going to do for the coming year, and then at the end of that year have a feedback as to how that has transpired? Because we do that in scrutiny. We do that in scrutiny. That's just what I'm asking.
Well, that's bypassed me, I'm afraid, Liz, if that's the case, which may be part of the problem. You know, so I think it needs to have a harder edge, and the reason I'm saying that is because of the lack of democracy at Wyker level. So, you know, there are, you know, for instance, the sort of plans for the West Yorkshire transport system, light transport system, whatever, has quite significant implications for North Kirklees. You really would want not a post hoc scrutiny of what they're doing, but a pre-decision making scrutiny, if you like, which is why I've called it accountability. And I've tried to use a different term to give it that different approach. That's all. It can be done within scrutiny, but it would need a different approach.
Yeah, I think we agree.
Liz, so
yours is you.
Yeah.
The leader of the council presents what they're going to do, and at the end you say, at the end of the year you say yes or no.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is actually questions about that programme.
Yeah. I can understand what you're saying.
Because it's too late once they're implemented.
Yes, I can understand what you're saying. And in actual fact, this is in actual fact where I would like to take more of scrutiny in that pre-decision scrutiny, right? And I would actually like Kirklees to do more of this. So rather than looking at all decisions afterwards, actually involve scrutiny on the way to major decisions. You know, something like a very large project like what you've mentioned, have scrutiny input along the way to help that process, you know, to give that input from scrutiny, so that it's not afterwards when you come back and you say, actually, you know, we might not agree with that, we agree with that, but, you know, and that actual fact would help the decision process be more robust across the council. That is actually where I would like to see scrutiny in Kirklees going far more. And I would agree that at a WICA level, a mayoral authority level, that needs to be something that is done far more as well. And I would also see that if there was a major project, such as a transport system across North Kirklees, that Kirklees scrutiny would also need to have some pre-decision work into that as well. So, you know, that is sort of a general direction that I think we should probably be going in anyway. Okay, I hope that helps everybody.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I think we all agree on that and have articulated sort of the same thing in different ways there. So I think that's something that we should certainly pick up. And that's sort of what I was referring to more broadly in terms of the relationship between regional and local scrutiny. But it's good to have that discussion, and I'll be sure to include that if we accept this. John, you've been very patiently waiting, so I'll bring you in.
And I want to talk about scrutiny as well. But mine are more questions about how the interrelationships work, really. So what I'm hoping we will see is, for example, when we have questions at full council to the executive, ordinarily in that list we can ask oral questions of the lead members of various committees. I'm assuming that we will have lead members on these 3 scrutiny committees from Kirklees Council that then would be in a position where they could respond to any questions from any member of council at those full council meetings where we are holding executive to account. So that's my first point on it. And my second one was, could we try and push for some form of scrutiny representative from WICA, whether that is the lead for the scrutiny panel or whether it's our lead member for that scrutiny panel, to attend the scrutiny panel at Kirklees. So, and Julie quite helpfully mentioned the 3 panels that they're setting up, which sit quite nicely. So we have a corporate scrutiny panel, we have an economy and infrastructure scrutiny panel. What was, sorry, I've forgotten the third one again.
Transport.
Oh, so transport would also be economy and infrastructure, or whether we realign ourselves at some point. But in a way that, for example, at corporate scrutiny, Paul Graham gets dragged along every time as the cabinet member responsible for corporate and the corporate portfolio. It would be useful to have some representative from West Yorkshire scrutiny attending the scrutiny panel at Kirklees that references that same area of responsibility, so that they can ask, so that we can ask questions of them, and it builds that relationship between the two. So I'm just wondering if that's something we could look at.
Can I just to clarify on that, John? Are you referring to asking an elected member who sits on the scrutiny panel to come, or a member of a WICA officer related to a particular whatever it is you want to ask about, whatever's on the agenda?
So no, I think there should be a standing attendance at our scrutiny, just in a way that Graham will always attend corporate scrutiny because he has a corporate portfolio and he loves attending. In a way, who is the right person from the scrutiny panel on corporate at West Yorkshire that should be always attending the Kirklees corporate scrutiny panel, so that they're picking up on what we're talking about, and they also we have the opportunity to ask them questions. I don't know whether the right answer to that is an officer or a lead member, but you know, presumably somebody who's closer to the way it will operate in practice is probably better placed to answer that. But I think building that relationship between the two is important, and it gives us another opportunity to have those conversations and questions across that. It does kind of mean our current economy and infrastructure scrutiny panel will get quite a lot to do, but maybe that's something we can reflect on once this is probably up and running. I did have one other point as well, which David Hall has asked me to raise, Will.
Okay.
That's in the actual report itself, section 6.3. It's talking about changes to the protocol, and I understand that, you know, this is a bit of an iterative process, but these protocols are really, really important. And as Councillor Pinnock made the point, there will be a lack of breadth of political representation at a senior level at the combined authority by the way things are looking. So it's important that any changes, subsequent changes to protocol, have cross-party agreement. And I'm not sure we're comfortable with delegating authority to just the chief executive in consultation with the leader. I think there needs to be a broader consultation than just with the leader. I accept that there isn't the time to start taking it back to various meetings and things, but I think we just need to broaden out that consultation from just being the leader of the council to perhaps being, you know, leading members or something like that, just so that we retain the opportunity to have that broader cross-party agreement in anything that may possibly change in terms of those protocols between now and when they're actually implemented. So I just think we need to look again at that officer recommendation 6.3. That's it.
I'll bring either Julie or Nick in on that. I think you know, the protocol is the same, obviously, as it is across the same across all the constituent councils, because we're all signing up to the same thing, and I think it's agreed now, isn't it? So that largely relates to, I think, if there's just any commas or apostrophes that need changing, so it can be quickly done across the. But yeah, but I imagine if there were any changes, they would want to discuss it at leading members to get that agreement. But I'll just bring Julie or Nick in if they have any input, anything they want to input on that issue.
I'll come in if you like there. So, Councillor Taylor, were you just suggesting are you talking about now, or are you talking about changes in the future? Because the draft that's there now is basically it.
Yeah, it changes in the future, Julie. If you read 6.3, it says delegate authority, chief executive, in consultation with the leader to agree any subsequent changes. So in other words, there would be no involvement from anybody in the council other than the leader and the chief executive. And I just think there needs to be broader agreement to any changes on those, because that is too loosely worded. You could introduce a new protocol or change a protocol completely, and it only needs to be agreed between the leader and the chief executive. And I don't think that's really appropriate. I just think it needs to be a bit broader than that. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes, just I don't know whether this will be helpful or not, but I think that there was a conversation about whether, and this will perhaps come back. When I say perhaps, it will come back to this committee in April when we look at changes to the council's constitution. So generally, also you can make changes throughout the year. Last year we weren't able to, because we weren't able to have annual council, but we will be considering a number of reports at this committee on the 22nd of April in relation to the constitution. So one of the suggestions is that this protocol can form part of the constitution. So though it's not legally binding, it's there as a principle, and therefore if we are going to look at it on an annual basis and review it, and we put it in the constitution, then it will be something that could be subject to scrutiny here. I don't mean scrutiny, I mean scrutiny here before it then goes to council to agree any changes. So does that help, perhaps?
I think the long term I'm entirely comfortable with. It's between now and when we get to May, in effect, if there are any proposed changes, because we have a draft that could alter. I hope it won't. But if there was any suggestion to alter it, there just needs to be that conversation. And currently, the way it's worded would suggest there doesn't need to be any conversation with anyone other than the leader.
Okay, so my understanding is this, that we want everybody to agree to enter into the same agreement, okay? And this is the draft that we want people to enter into moving forwards. Bar, you know, if somebody spots a typo or a missing comma or a capital letter somewhere, then that would be picked up in drafting. And in fact, actually, frankly, I'd pick it up myself as the monitoring officer, and I would do it without coming back to this. To anywhere to do it, I'd just do it basically. But I think that's the intention of that, and perhaps, I guess perhaps more widely to allow some flexibility. But if we think that it's helpful to come back, if it goes in our constitution as a protocol, then if we make any changes to it, it will need to come back.
I think I'm not making myself clear enough, Julie. I'm sorry. I'm not talking about the future. I'm not talking about post-May. Post-May, we will embed it in some way, and as you say, in the Constitution, maybe the way that we embed that. This is before us today, and it's going to Cabinet next week. Between that and the actual elections in May, there may be ongoing discussions and there may be tweaks that are needed. As this is currently worded, the only person who needs to agree that tweak is the leader. It actually is the Chief Executive in consultation with the leader. The point we're making is we don't think that's right. That is far too loosely worded. It gives far too much power to the Chief Executive in consultation with the leader. And I am suggesting that in that interim period between now and May, if there are any proposed changes, yes, we do delegate authority to the Chief Executive, but it's in consultation with leading members rather than just with the leader. That's all I'm trying to say. Is that clear enough?
It's a proposed amendment 6.3 to change in consultation with the leader to in consultation with leading members.
Yeah.
Can we say group leaders, can I suggest, rather than leading members, because it's not clear.
I don't know how we word it. I'm just saying it needs to be broader than just Shabir.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I suggest that it's significant changes as well, because really I'm not sure that we want to be in the situation where we're taking back commas and
I'm not worried about it. It's alterations to the protocols, isn't it? I mean, if you're correcting typos and grammatical errors, nobody's worried about that. But if we're inserting a new protocol or changing it, that ought to have broader agreement.
Okay. I think the intention is that they want people to. Sorry, apologies.
Sorry, Julie, I was going to suggest, so shall we amend so that it says any material changes to the protocol go to group members in consultation with group members? Sorry. Does that satisfy?
Group leaders think it is or something.
Yeah. If we refer to it as in consultation with group leaders for any material changes, therefore, I think, does that strike the balance between the dots and commas issue and wanting to ensure? Is that okay, Julie?
That's fine, and it's between now and when it's entered into. And just to clarify, I think the intention is to enter into it by the end of March. That this will be the final version of it, but yes. We'll cover off that concern by adding that in. Okay.
Yes. Hopefully, the last 10 minutes of discussion will be redundant in a few weeks' time. Councillor Lee Richards.
Sorry, before you move on. Was anybody going to comment on my suggestions around scrutiny and the relationship between our scrutiny and the West Yorkshire scrutiny? Are we picking that up or?
Yeah, taken on board, John, and I'll pick it up.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Lee Richards.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry I wasn't able to come to the workshop due to work commitments, so I'm only reading things that from the documents I've had. Protocol. Am I right in understanding that this is a sort of a movable, changeable, not a fixed document, but one that will be worked on by all the councils that are part of this mayoral combined authority? It's just one question. And if a lot of these concurrent powers, what happens if the local council disagrees? What sort of rights of veto or powers do they retain? And what can the mayor overrule? That's my question, please.
Thanks, Sue. I've got someone at the door. Can I just pass over to Julie and Nick and disappear very briefly whilst I deal with this COVID Zoom nightmare? But yeah, I'll pass over to Julie or Nick just to respond briefly. Thank you.
Okay, I'll respond to the first question. If Carl Larrett's on the line, which he is, I'll ask him to touch upon the issue about the second point, because he did cover that off in the presentation, and he's been more involved in the detail of it. But I certainly don't think it should be something that you should be concerned about. So, in terms of the protocol, the intention is to sign the protocol by the end of this month, okay, and that the protocol will then be reviewed in 12 months' time to see if it's working, okay. So it sets out the principles about how we would manage the operation of concurrent powers. When we were talking at the workshop, we gave some examples of how some of those concurrent powers might work, and when there might be a veto. I have to say, it's very unlikely that you'd ever have to use a veto, because it's unlikely that you have power things which conflict, because you'll have gone through a process to agree. But I'm gonna, if that's possible, ask Carl to come on and respond to that. Carl, I think you're there. I know that you've not got your yeah, okay, thank you.
Hello, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks, Carl.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi. It's I think a question around statutory consents which are dealt with in the draft protocol, and some of the functions in the table at I think it's Appendix 3 to the report. That table will indicate which functions require consents, what are known as statutory consents, which are set out in the order. So as an example, if the combined authority wanted to acquire some land in Kirklees compulsorily, for example, that's a matter, that function couldn't be exercised by the combined authority without consent of Kirklees Council. That consent would be given by our member, essentially the leader. And if consents, and that's how it would be dealt with, so it would require consents. The advantage of having the protocol is that it adds additional detail to what's in the order. So we get that one of the benefits of agreeing and signing up to the protocol is that we've agreed between the 5 councils and the combined authority that there would be a formal report considered at a meeting of the combined authority, and that notice of the intention to seek that consent will be given as early as practicable, and certainly no later than 28 days, which is the key decision notice period. Does that answer the question, Councillor Lee Richards?
Largely, yes. Yeah. Sorry, because as I say, I couldn't attend the workshop, which was a pity, but so I'm just going by what I've been reading through, and obviously I don't have a legal mind, so I'm coming to it as a sort of lay person. And we would just have one member on that combined authority committee, is that right? The leading member.
Yes. So yes, the leader will be on there, generally the leader, but then there are some other seats that are filled through the political balance as well. So, for example, I think Councillor Hall was previously on the combined authority as part of that balancing up. So there will be, depending on what the outcome of the election is, there will be potentially others on there from Kirklees. It's not guaranteed, and there is a discussion that takes place once the outcome of the election is known. Does that clarify?
That helps. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, it's just Wicker can seem very much at a distance and remote from Kirklees. So thank you, Chair, as well.
No, thank you very much. Right, I don't think anyone else has indicated. Does anyone want to make any further comments or have any questions or suggestions for representations that we'll be making going forward. No? Right, so I assume, are we happy to accept the report on the basis of the discussions that we've had?
As amended.
Yes, yes, yeah. Relating to 6.3 as we discussed. Yeah. Excellent. Right, thank you very much, everyone. That brings us on to our final item, which is the dates of council meetings 21-22, reference to council. Julie.
Thanks, Chair. So it's me again. Hopefully this is the sort of most straightforward of the what's on this committee today, but you never know. I think that the dates have been circulated previously to groups, but this is a standard report that comes to Public Governance and Audit Committee on an annual basis. It has to come here before it's considered by annual council, and basically it sets out the proposed dates for the council meetings. For holding the executive to account and key discussions in accordance with our council procedurals. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Hopefully this will be an item that John perhaps doesn't have an amendment to. Fingers crossed. Councillor Pinnock.
Yeah, I'm presuming it follows the pattern that we've had last year and the year before and the year before. Yeah, that's fine. So the only question I've got, which is really a sort of suggestion for a future meeting of this committee, is just to understand how key discussion topics are chosen and what the whole essence of key discussions. What's the purpose? Who selects them? What happens next? That sort of just discussion really, and not for now, obviously, but for future, I think, if that's possible.
Thanks, Councillor Pinnock. John, did you want to come in?
I'd just agree with Councillor Pinnock. I think also if we can make sure that there is adequate notice given of the nature of those items for key discussion, and that if there are presentations or papers prepared, that those are circulated at least in time with the agendas for the council meetings, and not that where we have had in the past where we get to a council meeting with little more than a 1 or 2 liner about what it's about, and then there's a presentation either by officers or cabinet members which we're then expected to respond to. And I think that leads to a poorer discussion. And I think some of the key discussions that we've had, and I recall one we had on social care that was really good, where there wasn't the point scoring, the political playing and things, and it was a genuine discussion about people's experiences and contributions. And I think they're far more valuable, and they present this council in a good light. And so if we could, look at that and try and bear that in mind, if we bring things forward where there is the notice, so people have the opportunity to reflect, and then they're able to make better contributions than if it's kind of sprung on the last minute. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Before I bring other members in, Julie, can I just ask, is there a current protocol or procedure rule about how those issues are decided upon, or can you explain how it works currently, please?
No, there isn't a protocol, and it's generally, in my observation, a discussion with senior officers and members about topics which are of specific concern, or where a decision might be coming up in relation to something, and it's important that there's a wide discussion and contribution to that. I think you gave the example of social care. There have been a number of other examples which are picked up as part of that. So there isn't an agreed process. I think other people in the past have commented that presentations are not necessarily received in good time. I think that that's been listened to, and I think that by and large, and I think that things are made available in advance more than they were. I don't know if people feel the same now. We're having virtual meetings actually, and I don't know whether that impacts, because it is a very different format about how the meetings are managed and how people engage with them. But we can certainly take that back. I don't think it would be a surprise to the Chief Executive that I brought that back, and maybe there needs to be a conversation about how we set them moving forwards. So yes, I'm sorry I can't do a protocol because it doesn't exist. It's more around what are the current topics which require a discussion.
Yeah. Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just slightly puzzled. We've been talking about the mayor, the new mayor, whether he or she will be invited to attend the council. Now, looking at this timetable, would it be of benefit to us in Kirklees if we invited that person, he or she, to set out their ambitions for West Yorkshire, or would we rather wait until we see how they're performing? What would colleagues think about that? I think it may be great to have, as soon as they're elected, or as soon as possible, to invite them to set out their ambitions for West Yorkshire and how it affects Kirklees in particular. So rather than wait, and what date would you? I know you'll have to work around the diary of the mayor, but I think it might be useful. I don't know what colleagues think.
Thanks, Eric. You make a good point. I can't give you a time right now, but as you point out, there isn't it isn't in the list on this agenda item, but it is something that we will be discussing at our next meeting of Corporate Governance and Audit, because if we do decide to take up that issue of having a mayoral accountability meeting, it'd be an additional meeting to council meetings. It wouldn't, knock off one of the existing ones that we have on this list, and we'll have to look at the whether we decide to put that in the procedure rules and the constitution. Obviously, those are items that we're taking at the next meeting of this committee. So I'm sure we'd be able to have a further discussion about potential timings. That's not necessarily, it's not for our committee to set the dates, but I'm sure those discussions will be had and we can feed into it. Is there anything you might want to add on that, Julie?
Sorry, apologies, having difficulty turning my mute off. I think sort of, I don't know when you're intending to feed back to the mayoral combined authority, but I'm assuming in the next few weeks, so that the outcome of that can be reflected in any reports that we produce to come to Corporate Governance and Audit Committee on the 22nd of April, where we'll be making proposed changes to the constitution. So that could be, suggesting a particular date when the mayor comes to visit us. So we can certainly consider that on the agenda and have a conversation about it. If members want to do that, then we'll include that in the report. If that suits you.
Yeah, I'm keen for us to make those representations on mayoral scrutiny fairly quickly, so that hopefully we can get all of the response, whatever the response may be, back in good time for us to act on that before our next meeting. Yeah. Right. Any further comments or questions, members? No. Are we happy to accept the reports as is? Thank you very much, everyone. And I think that is it for us today. So it was lovely to see you all. Stay safe. Thank you very much. And I will close the meeting.
All right.